Well, when lockdown started, I was my best self. I was the most efficient, emotionally regulated I have ever been. You should have seen me. I was amazing. I was cooking meals for our family of 6 and meals for the church freezer. We adopted 2 healthcare workers and I was supporting them with meals after their shifts and helping with grocery shopping. We had an influx of homeless people and some who'd lost their jobs arriving at the manse looking for help. So I organised a food drive and had church members picking up prepackaged, frozen, canned meals that we would then be able to distribute with ease. I visited some of the elderly members of our congregation and helped them set up Zoom and showed them how to connect to online church gatherings. I started a DVD library for those who would be bored in lockdown and would just need something to occupy the time. I was listening to podcasts, reading books, checking in with friends. Pilates classes went online and I was Zooming in for classes 4 to 5 times a week. My local cafe was selling flour and I imagined that would fulfill my dreams of becoming a baker. So I went and bought a 10-kilogram bag. I bought a new rug and began redecorating parts of our home. I had started composting in January, and so we had enough compost for me to start my veggie patch and start sorting out the garden. I woke up at 5 a.m. every morning so that I could go for a walk for some much needed alone time. And I took my elderly dad and 3 kids out for the same walk every afternoon. Added on top of all of that, there was homeschooling. I taught our kindergartner how to write using shaving cream, and I taught our first grader how to count with pegs. Our toddler was also home from preschool, and so we pulled out the paint and the craft supplies and we learnt our shapes and our colours. Of course, like the rest of you, I also had to adjust to church moving online. My husband and I quickly relearnt how to do video editing. He, of course, mastered sound editing, and Zoom meetings became our new and oh so draining normal. If it sounds unsustainable, you best believe it was. I could not carry on at that pace. My prayer through the first month of lockdown was, Lord, please give me the strength to do what you need me to do. I'm usually a very anxious person. After I had my eldest child, I battled intense and debilitating anxiety. And all the way through the first month of lockdown, as I continued to be surprised by my lack of anxiety and fear, I knew that it was in part due to the hard work I had done with therapists over the years. It was in part because of the gift of prayer and the way that relieves our anxiety. But mostly, it was a generous gift from God. In His kindness and His graciousness to me, I was able to not only survive, but thrive and help those around me get through the hardest elements of lockdown. But even though I knew that it was a gift from God, I was quietly a bit proud. I was on the phone with a lady from church who is really very isolated. She's widowed, particularly vulnerable because of her health and her age, and she really seemed to appreciate my phone call. So I made a promise that I couldn't keep. I told her that I would call her the same day, on the same time, every week. A couple of weeks later, I made a promise to another elderly lady from church, also isolated and struggling with loneliness. I told her that I would take her for a walk once a week. It was a promise that I couldn't keep. I had too much going on. Why was I making these promises I couldn't keep? I'm a helper. I'm a fixer. That's the kind of person God made me. I see a need, I fix it. I'm also, and I don't say this to boast, but because it's obvious that God has blessed me this way, but I'm very capable. I'm able to help, to care, to meet needs. But through this process and through lockdown, I've been learning that just because I can see a need, it doesn't mean that I have to fix it. And I've also been learning that I have a rather self-inflated view of myself as a pastoral carer for these women that I love in my church. I was so focused on what I could and should do for them that I did not ask God to meet their needs. And so slowly, my prayer changed. Instead of asking God to give me the strength to do the work that He needed me to do, I began asking for wisdom to discern what He wanted me to do. My prayer became, Lord, help me to do the good works that you have already set out in advance for me to do. Nothing more, nothing less. Help me to trust in your ability to provide for the needs and cares of those that you love. Help me to remember that you love them more than I love them, and that you are more able to care for them than I am. Of course, the adrenaline eventually passed. As stock levels in the shops returned to normal and our elderly church members became more competent at accessing Zoom, and as restrictions lifted, people needed me less. The wet and the cold set in and I started walking less. The kids kept interrupting my Pilates classes, and it became more of an effort to tune in than to sleep in. We still have about 9 kilos of flour sitting in our pantry because our oven was broken and I couldn't bake anything. The rooms that I redecorated were constantly messy because everybody was home all the time. I was drowning in laundry and dirty dishes and cups, and the weeds won the battle in the veggie patch. And everybody was working on their gardens, so I couldn't find anything to buy at Bunnings to help me through the process. Homeschool quickly dissolved into reading a book in the morning, building Lego throughout the day, and Disney marathons in the afternoon. When I finally paused to take stock of all my half-baked, disrupted, short-sighted efforts, a sense of shame poured over me. I had not finished half of the projects I had started. I wondered what kind of model I would set for my children, and I was embarrassed by my failures. Of course, there's an abundance of books I can read that will help me learn how to set more achievable goals. Got one right here. What's best next? I have mentors and dear brothers and sisters in Christ who call me back to remembering what's important, and they keep me accountable. I'm thankful for them. I have a wonderful husband who is very patient with my enthusiasm for projects that are never completed, and he's very gracious when they aren't finished. But more than all of that, I have faith in a great God who is so very unlike me. I'm reminded in Revelations that from the very foundations of the earth, he had begun his salvation plan through the Lamb that was slain. I know that the Lord who began a good work in me, he is going to finish that through to completion. I know that he is faithful, even when I am faithless. and that he will do what he has promised, because he cannot disown himself. That's the hope that I want to rest in. Not just in this unprecedented season, but even when it passes. Just as my good works and my strengths and my resilience point to God's graciousness and kindness to me, so too do my failures. He is good. He is faithful. He will do what he has promised. This is my hope.